Let's talk about the three stages of memory. Not to be confused with processes, these are the three stages of memory. So while you're storing memories, these are the three places that they could go. The first is sensory memory. This is the shortest stage of memory, and it is the very first stage of memory. When you experience any kind of sensory information, it goes to that sensory memory. And there's different types. You have visual sensory memory, that is the temporary place that visual information goes. Then we have echoic sensory memory, which is the specific type of auditory sensory memory. But most information that we are exposed to in our sensory memory immediately goes away. So when I look around my office, I just looked at dozens of things. But if you ask me to remember what my printer currently looks like or what color pen was on my desk, I can't tell you. That's because even though I was taking that information in, it went in sensory and right back out, because we have gotten very good, especially as adults, of letting go of most of the sensory information we're exposed to because it's not important. Imagine being in a cafeteria and being able to smell every smell, see everything, hear every noise. Nobody wants that. So the second stage of memory is the short-term memory, and this is what we pay attention to. In fact, the name of the process that puts information in your short-term memory is called selective attention. So this can happen one of two ways. One is when you try to actively pay attention to something. So hopefully you're listening to me right now. I don't know why this would be playing if you weren't listening. It's certainly not soothing background music for anything. But you are hopefully listening to the words I'm saying. So if I asked you to repeat the last thing I said, you could hopefully do so. That's because you're paying attention to it, and that process of selective attention is keeping it in your short-term memory. However, sometimes selective attention puts information in your short-term memory without your conscious decision to put it there. This is fun. So if you're ever driving along the road and all of a sudden you just feel like you're being watched and you look to your left and the car beside of you is like, why is he screaming Kelly Clarkson at the top of his lungs? That is also selective attention. When I'm looking straight ahead, I'm focusing on that one thing I see in front of me, but my eyes are still processing information over here. I can actually see my hands flapping about even though I'm looking this way. So that visual information is being interpreted by my brain. If one of my hands were to suddenly burst into flame, my brain would go, whoa, that seems important. Perhaps we should shift our focus here. And so it would unconsciously make me aware of that information. It's the same thing when you're in a space with a lot of people and it's just noise, 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 and then all of a sudden you hear Wesley, and you realize someone's talking about you. How did you pick out your name and all that chatter? Well, it's because your brain is taking all that information in. It just doesn't hold on to anything that doesn't seem important. But sometimes it picks things out that are important without your conscious awareness. Pretty neat. All right, so we have information in our short-term memory. We can keep it there through repetition. So if I were to give you a series of numbers like 5, 8, 12, and 9, and told you if you remembered all those, you get an A in the course, all of a sudden you're going 5, 8, 12, 9, 5, 8, 12, 9, 5, 8, 12, 9, because you're engaging in maintenance rehearsal. And that is what we engage in to keep information in the short-term memory. If we do that long enough, like long enough, we could, in theory, put it in our long-term memory. But it's really not the most effective way to do that. To really take information from our short-term memory and put it into long-term memory, we don't want to engage in maintenance rehearsal. We want to engage in elaborative rehearsal. And this is when you make information meaningful to you. Now, there are specific types of memories called flashbulb memories, which are unexpected and emotional. And so these are the really good and the really bad moments in your life that you can recall like they were yesterday. So those are flashbulb memories, and they're very meaningful to us. And that's why they stay in our long-term memory, even though we are actually very likely to make mistakes with the retrieval of that memory, which we'll get to in a later video. But not all information is automatically meaningful. Sometimes we have to make information meaningful. So when you're studying for a class, like say psychology, you could cram and repeat information over and over again, hoping that that maintenance rehearsal keeps it in your short-term memory long enough to pass that test. Or you can find ways to engage in elaborative rehearsal, which puts information in your long-term memory and keeps it there. So for example, if I'm trying to get you to understand the symptoms of depression, and I give you the list of like 10 symptoms for depression, You could just keep repeating them over and over again, or using flashcards over and over again until you have memorized them. But I guarantee you, once you test, if you run into me years, months, perhaps even days later, that information will be gone. But if as I go over the symptoms of depression, you think, my Aunt Julia has every single one of those, and she has depression. Well, now you've connected that information to something that's already meaningful to you. You know your Aunt Julia, she's in your long-term memory. So all you've done is add new information to that. That's elaborative rehearsal. That is the best way to study. I feel like it's a little bit easier sometimes in classes like psychology. It's more difficult in your other courses. But that's how to study, folks. That's how you learn. You make information meaningful to you in some way, and you don't ever have to cram or try to study it. It just becomes a part of your long-term memory. It's awesome. So those are those three stages of memory. Sensory memory, the first and shortest stage. Short-term memory, where information goes as long as we're paying attention to it. And long-term memory, where meaningful information goes and stays, for the most part. That's another